The lunchtime sun poured through the glass walls of the upscale restaurant, turning every polished surface into a blinding shimmer of gold. But even that warm daylight couldn't soften the violence of what happened next. The entire dining floor froze as a sharp crack echoed across the room, a CEO's hand striking the face of his pregnant wife so suddenly, so viciously, that silverware trembled on tables and gasps rippled like a wave. In that suspended moment of horror, no one noticed the chef sprinting out from the kitchen, ripping off his apron as his eyes locked onto the scene. Few people knew his real background. Before cooking, before this restaurant, before everything, he had been a Navy SEAL. And the woman who had just been slapped was his little sister. Before we go deeper, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Acts of Kindness if you believe kindness, respect, and second chances can change lives. Your support helps us bring stories like this to more hearts. The day had begun almost peacefully for Marissa Hale, a gentle-hearted woman in her late 20s whose quiet strength often hid the storm she carried. She had arrived at the restaurant with her husband, Richard Blair, a sharply dressed CEO known in the business world for his ruthless negotiating style and immaculate public image. Most people admired him, envied him even, but they never saw the side of him Marissa lived with: the temper, the pressure, the subtle humiliations, and now escalating aggression. She was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and hopeful for even the smallest moment of peace. She had told herself that maybe lunch together would be a new start. Maybe he would soften. Maybe fatherhood would change him. She sat with her hands folded over her belly, whispering comfort to the unborn child while pretending everything was normal. But Richard had arrived already irritated, speaking sharply, moving impatiently, and scrolling through his phone instead of acknowledging her. As sunlight spilled across the table, she felt the warmth on her skin. It should have made her feel calm, but instead, she felt only dread. She could sense the shift in his mood as clearly as she felt the baby shift inside her. His anger always came like a sudden storm, without warning except the tightening in his jaw. And when a small misunderstanding occurred, something as minor as her asking a gentle suggestion about the menu, his voice rose, his irritation snapped, and then his hand moved faster than thought. She never imagined he would strike her in public. But there she was, face stinging, ears ringing, and the entire room staring. The shock was deeper than the physical pain. It was the realization that the man she had once trusted with her life had crossed a line so severe that even strangers recoiled. Tears welled in her eyes, not from the hit, but from heartbreak, humiliation, and the fear of what could happen next, especially with her vulnerable unborn baby. In the kitchen, her older brother, Carson Hale, had been preparing dishes with the discipline of a soldier and the dedication of a man rebuilding his life after years of service. He thought today would be like any other day, moving between sizzling pans, coaching younger chefs, and creating flavors that brought comfort to people he would never meet personally. But when he heard the commotion and then saw through the open kitchen door the sight of his pregnant sister clutching her stomach while Richard towered over her, something ancient and primal surged inside him. Carson hadn't been a SEAL for years, but the instincts were still there, the protectiveness, the alertness, the readiness to intervene. Without hesitation, he tore off his apron and sprinted onto the dining floor. The other diners parted instinctively, sensing a force of nature moving through them. His chest tightened at the sight of Marissa's trembling hands, her tear-streaked face, and her protective arms encircling her belly. He didn't need to ask what happened. He saw it in her eyes, fear mixed with resignation, as if she had been quietly enduring far more than this single moment. Richard, taken aback by Carson's sudden appearance, tried to smooth his expression into arrogance. But the force of Carson's presence was overpowering. Carson didn't shout. He didn't raise his fist. He simply positioned himself between Richard and Marissa with the resolute calm of someone trained to stand between danger and the innocent. And although the restaurant manager rushed over, torn between loyalty to a wealthy customer and the moral clarity of what had happened, the diners remained frozen, silent witnesses afraid to breathe too loudly. Marissa felt her knees weaken, and Carson instantly steadied her, his hand warm and steady on her shoulder. He guided her away from the table, away from Richard, away from everything that had been hurting her. But Richard, consumed by ego and terrified of losing control of his image, followed closely, insisting she was overreacting and misunderstanding him. His words only made the situation clearer to everyone. Carson inhaled slowly, wrestling with the part of him that wanted to unleash years of military training on a man who did not deserve a single inch of grace. But he kept his composure for one reason. Marissa needed calm, not chaos. She needed safety, not another explosion. Outside on the sunlit patio, the brightness of the day made everything feel unreal. Birds still chirped, cars still passed. People on the street walked by, unaware of the heartbreak unfolding behind glass walls. Marissa clung to the railing, tears falling freely now. She felt ashamed, even though she had done nothing wrong. Carson stood beside her, silently anchoring her back to herself. He had always been her protector when they were children, shielding her from bullies, from storms, from nightmares. Now life had placed him in that role again, at a moment when she needed him most. Richard stepped outside too, frantic now that he realized the situation was spiraling out of his control. But Carson blocked him with a subtle yet immovable stance. The sunlight glinted off Carson's eyes as he studied Richard, not with hatred, but with a soldier's assessment of a threat that needed to be neutralized. He finally spoke, his tone low and steady, forcing Richard to face the truth he refused to admit. Even without raising his voice, his words cut deeper than any shout. Richard's face paled, and for the first time he looked smaller, like a man whose power existed only as long as no one challenged him. Marissa wiped her tears slowly, feeling something shift inside her. For years she had been shrinking herself, convincing herself that the man she married would someday return to the kindness he once showed. She had hidden bruises, excuses, and loneliness. But today, under the clear daylight with her brother standing beside her, she realized she didn't have to be small anymore. She wasn't alone. She had a life growing inside her, a child who deserved safety and love. And she had a brother who would walk through fire to protect her. Carson encouraged her gently to breathe, to stand tall, to reclaim her voice. For the first time in years, Marissa felt strength returning to her like sunlight slowly warming frozen ground. She straightened her spine, though her legs trembled, and refused to look away. Richard sputtered explanations, but his words felt hollow in the open air. When Carson finally escorted Marissa to his truck, she didn't resist. It was the beginning of her reclaiming her life. At the hospital, doctors ensured that both she and the baby were safe. Carson remained by her side, silently watching over her like he used to when she was a newborn sleeping in a crib beside his childhood bed. The doctor's reassurance brought Marissa to tears again, this time out of relief. She held her belly closely, whispering that everything would be okay, not because Richard would change, but because she would change her path. Carson helped her file a report, connected her with a shelter for women who needed secure temporary housing, and contacted a lawyer who specialized in domestic cases. News of the incident reached the board members of Richard's company within hours, thanks to videos recorded by shaken customers. The polished CEO who once seemed untouchable now faced consequences he had long avoided. His public image crumbled, but Marissa didn't care about revenge. She cared about moving forward, building a home where her child would only know gentleness. Days passed. Sunlight filled the safe house room where Marissa finally slept peacefully. Carson visited often, bringing homemade meals, soft blankets, and an unwavering presence. Their bond deepened, shaped by shared pain and unspoken gratitude. She often watched him watching her with a look that said he wished he could have protected her sooner. But she reassured him that his timing had been perfect. He arrived precisely when she needed him most. As weeks turned into a month, Marissa's belly grew, her steps steadied, and her hope returned. She began attending prenatal classes, bonding with other mothers, learning to trust herself again. She found work in a small art studio where her gentle hands brought color back into her life. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a part of herself she had lost. and every time Carson saw her laugh, he felt like the world made sense again. And then the day finally came. Under the bright morning sky, with sunlight pouring through the hospital windows like a blessing, Marissa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She held him to her chest, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the miracle of new beginnings. Carson stood nearby, arms folded but eyes glistening, witnessing a moment that felt like victory over every shadow she had survived. When she handed him the baby to hold, he cradled the tiny child with a tenderness that surprised even him. He looked down at his nephew and silently vowed to be there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every brave step forward. Marissa named her son Aiden, meaning little fire, because he was born out of courage. As she held him, she whispered a promise that their home would always be a place of warmth, never fear. Carson kissed her forehead gently, knowing she wasn't just beginning a new chapter, she was rewriting her entire story. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more real, emotional, and inspiring stories to you.